All right, we're back with Mission Literary Network Radio and our guest, Michael Griggs. Mr. Griggs, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, how you doing today, sir?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good, good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let me just take a bit and read a little bit about your bio. It says here, Mr. Griggs is a Detroit native. He's an instructor at Wayne County Community College District and has lectured at several colleges and universities in Michigan over the years. He has studied abroad in Egypt, learning the major achievements in history of ancient Africa. He is the author of 3 books, The African American Art of War, and his accompanying workbook. The second book is The Takeover, and his newest book is Sleepwalking While Black. In addition, he is a real estate developer and entrepreneur involved with building residential homes in Detroit. Michael, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
That's
so,
good.
Jump into this. Okay, as an author, you've chosen to focus on subjects of Black consciousness. Why is that your focus?
Well, I think that a lot of our problems stem from the lack of consciousness, the lack of being aware, and there's no way you can look at the various studies of the various things that impact our community and would suggest that we're conscious of our engagement here and the outcome. So I wanted to, dwell into that, and I teach Black psychology, Black history, and with racism being the number one problem globally in the world, it's something that I deal with day to day, and I write about it, talk about it, speak about it for years now.
Oh, okay, that is it. Well, that's an interesting title, Sleepwalking While Black. Why did you choose that particular for your book?
Well, I thought it was catchy, driving while black, which a lot of black men, we're familiar with that. Well, sleepwalking while black was, when we look at some of the data and things of that nature, sleepwalking is a metaphor which suggests you're just not aware, you're not conscious, which we're not conscious of, a lot of things that affect our community. We tend to be a community where our children for decades have been dying in the greatest numbers, dropping out of school in the greatest numbers. We have the most broken families, and the list goes on and on. So therefore, I came up with sleepwalking, which suggests that we're not conscious, and we need the information from our fathers and from our tradition to help spark the consciousness needed to solve and engage some of these problems that affect us.
I understand what you're saying, but in my own opinion, it seems to me like the black community is just overwhelmed. There's so much that that's going on in the community. It's hard to grasp it. And as an individual, it's difficult to determine what to do and where to do it. How do you feel about that?
Well, most of that is found in our tradition, because a lot of things that we wrestle with today, let's just say relationships, if you will. We have a tradition that most of us are not conscious of, that taught us how to engage and how to maintain productive relationships. That's just one aspect that comes from our tradition that can help remedy the problem of all this, broken down relationships that we have, how children should engage with their parents, how men should engage with women. What is it to be a black man? What is it to be a son? What is it to be a father? A lot of these things and this mass confusion that we have is rooted in not knowing our history and our tradition, because in that history and our tradition, it tells us how we should do this, how we should eat, how we should run a community, how we should run a household. So not having that knowledge, this is why we're overwhelmed.
So why did you think now was a good time to release this book?
Well, I've been writing, and, this is one of many things, but I was pushed to a great extent by a lot of my students who come to my class. I teach like a black psychology class among other classes, and a lot of them they're really engaged in class, but they pull me by the side and they say, look, I love what I'm getting in this class, but we can't have everybody take this class, so we need you to start writing and putting this stuff out there. So at the students' request, I began writing more and more so more people can have a similar experience that some of the students had in the classroom.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So the research, what type of research did you do, while you were writing?
Well, I've been studying us for it's been over 20 years. And my mentor, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, who I studied under in Egypt and over here in the States, was the same mentor that Malcolm X had. So I had him and Asa Hilliard, some of our best and brightest minds. I have read and I've studied formal education, informal education, and looked at remedies to solve some of these problems. And history was the best. It was the best teacher because I see a lot of these problems in history. So a lot of things that we see on a day-to-day, it's a predictable outcome based on those historical events. I mean, it's predictable that hurt people will hurt people. And, it makes so much sense. And if you understand the pain and the depth of what we went through, then a lot of this, it makes more sense.
Okay. And one of the things that you just discussed in your book is cultural manipulation. And you say that comes along with racism.
Yes.
Why don't you explain what you mean by that?
Well, we are black people who we're engaged in trying to use Western culture to bring out the best in us, which, in essence, Western culture is where racism, white supremacy stem from. So we're trying to use their model to help us fly, if you will, trying to teach our children all about white people to help bring out the best in black children. And this is something that no other group who in their right mind would not put other people first and foremost. They will put their mothers and fathers before anyone else, and then they will learn about other people after that. But we're using Western culture to kind of forge ahead and navigate through American society. And that's why, to a great extent, these problems, you see us at the bottom rung, because it doesn't work for us.
Okay. What would you say is possibly the greatest impact of racism in today's society?
Well, today, it's more psychological. In a nutshell, if you look at in general, the average black person, in general, what we do is we send our children to school, starting at kindergarten all the way through college, to learn all about white people, in hopes that we graduate and we get a job working for white people, where we save up money to buy a house to live around white people, where we hope to have kids that can go to school with white people. Now, this is the norm for us. Other people are not addicted and obsessed with having other groups part of every major decision in life. But what's normal to us is abnormal to the rest of the world because we're sleepwalking. We're not conscious of this. Other groups don't aspire to be the workers and to live around other groups, and everything about their existence has to do with the people with the lightest skin on the planet involved in it, because we're sleepwalking. So this normacy that we have right now is putting us behind the 8 ball, because it's not normal. And we don't have any successful group that believes in that like we do, or behaves like that like we do. It keeps us at the bottom.
That's some pretty powerful stuff, Michael. You sure you don't have a doctor in front of your name?
Say it again.
I said, you sure you don't have a doctor or a PhD behind your name or something like that?
Well, I thought that's what you said. I had Dr. Ben and some of our best thinkers. I mean, they were my mentors. So, and our fathers, to me, that's where we can get our best wisdom from. So if I did, it would be an informal PhD from the teachings from Dr. Ben.
I hear you. That, formal is good enough, especially when, you can deliver information like that, a person would have to pay attention to, because you're saying some powerful things.
Thank you.
Who do you think your book is going to benefit most?
Well, and generally the black community, and I'm hoping and I'm working with educators from different colleges and different schools, and I'm trying to make it as a teacher, I'm sensitive about this. I want teachers to engage our students where they are. I actually want a culture of education. I want that curriculum to reflect our interests. I no longer think that we can afford to go forward with having, black parents send their black children to a black school to teach them all about white people. Because if we stepped in another community and we saw that, we would think it would be insane. If Jewish parents had Jewish children at a Jewish school teaching them all about Jamaicans, we would step away and be like, wow, what's that all about? So I want to have us thinking about what's the best education for our children. Is it to put our mothers and fathers last, or is it to put our mothers and fathers first, so we can have children who respect the very people who they're learning about? Because I often get asked a question about our children and their mindset and how they don't listen to and respect their elders. And I say, well, as a teacher, we're not teaching black children to listen to black folks and to respect them. We're teaching them to listen and respect other people. So this respect that's desperately needed in our community, we need to start that from the very institutions that we're paying for.
Wow. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. That makes perfect sense, man. And the way you lay it out, you can't help but to ignore to recognize the lies behind it, and we'd all be to ignore that. It makes perfect sense. It does.
We would just be joining the rest of the human family, and we know that the Arab put his father first. We know that whites put their fathers first. We know that the Chinese put Confucius in them first. We're just saying that our parents need to be revered and looked at a similar way. And the Bible teaches you this too. The Bible tells us one commandment says, you should honor your mother and father, so your days on this earth will be long. Now, we're the group that's choosing not to do that in our schools, and ironically, we're the same group that's dying in the greatest numbers.
Right.
So it's even a biblical commandment that tells us to do this.
Yeah. And you would think that, being as strong a religious community as we are, we would understand that better. I certainly, that is definitely a powerful lesson. Other than that, what lessons or knowledge do you want people to take away from reading your book?
Well, I think that a lot of things, it can't answer all the problems, but it definitely addresses a lot of issues. And it takes us from looking for others, away from looking for others to come and solve our problems. And instead, it looks at us and our own behavior. How do we contribute to undermining our children's well-being? How, for example, in Detroit, how do you have the blackest city in America that spends $2 billion in the suburbs every year, and only 5% of its disposable income in its own community? When you break that down, that's 95 cents out of every dollar the average black person has. They invested in white families, and we only invest a nickel on our own children, and we wonder why they're dying in these streets. So my book is saying, look at how we engage. Look at how this culture has manipulated us to be engaged in undermining our own stability, how we're robbing our families and our children of a long life. What things can we do from an individual level that can stem the tide of so many things that overwhelm us? And it addresses those things. It not only points out the problem, but there are solutions in there because, like I said, it's been decades of me looking at these issues and seeing what we can do to solve some of these problems.
Right. Now, I'm certain that the average person listening to this, this interview would say, well, that all makes sense, and and I'm for us getting it together. But it's certainly it seems like an insurmountable task. How do we get started, Michael? What do you think that we need to take?
Well, that old cliche is, it starts at home. So we can start doing these things in the first institution that we have control over, or many of us would like to have control over, our homes, and the folks inside of our homes. And then I think, as an educator, it's so important that the minds of folks who are being educated, that they learn these lessons, that they learn to value their mothers and fathers, that we no longer reduce our black leadership down to slogans, I have a dream, keep hope alive, or by any means necessary. But we truly get into the mindset of the folks who paved the way for us. Because if we know their psychology and if we learn their psychology, we become just like them. and the neighborhoods that they had with that psychology where the doors was left unlocked, we can have those neighborhoods again, because we can change old ideas with new ideas. We just need the ideas of our parents, the ideas of the ones who came before us. And if we start there, learning them, their psychology, not their adversary psychology, because we see what that is doing in our community. If we start there, that'll be a major step for us. But we have to engage our schools. Nobody, black, white, or brown, will sit back in their right mind and say our schools are doing a wonderful job. We all know they're not. But what direction are we going to take these schools? We need to take them in a more positive direction. And we have a history where we had better behavior than we do now. We just need those ideas and that psychology of yesterday put in the curriculum today, and you'll see the change that a lot of us been asking for.
All right. Oh, I can certainly testify to that. You know, I mean, I think about how things were when I was in school. And, you know, we've been hearing that, you know, our schools are terrible, and we've been hearing that for a long, long time now.
Yeah.
But, you know, when I back about the time that I spent in school, I'm racking my brain to try to think about what was so terrible about, you know, the school system. And frankly, I can't see it. I mean, I know, you know, that there were bad kids, but, you know, there are bad kids that are a part of every generation, you know, but that wasn't, you know, what the school system was about. I mean, we were putting people out of school with degrees that were going on to college and making a name for themselves, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, a large number of the people that I grew up with who still live here in Detroit today, you know, they're in positions of power. They're in positions of authority, you know. So, you know, I look at them and I look at myself and I say, well, you know, once upon a time we were doing things right, you know. So I don't get, you know, where it all went wrong at, you know. And, I know that I'm one.
I agree with you. And history is the best, you know, it's the best teacher about it. You know, this behavior that we see that overwhelms us today. To a great extent, this is something new. I'm Generation X, so I'm an integration baby. And Malcolm, people like Dr. Bobby Wright, who was a famous psychologist, Zora Neale Hurston, and so many other people were apprehensive about integration. And many of them voiced their opinions about, hey, if you allow people who hate you, who spraying you with water hoses and sicking dogs on the breasts of black women, bombing churches, if you allow your children to get the same education that brought those evils to our community, just imagine what the children would be like. Well, at that time, you know, most people, you know, they couldn't imagine black children who were respecting elders at that time, who we didn't have gangs running around, home invading. We didn't have none of that. So the average person just couldn't believe that black children would become something different than what they were used to. But after that, after we became more educated by the very people who were attacking our community more and more, we became more and more like them. And then you saw gangs, my generation and the Generation Y. We became just like them. Money was everything to us. The morals and values decayed. Gangs shooting up everything. I mean, I grew up off of Dexter, in the Dexter-Linwood area. It was rough. Most of those people were out of their minds growing up.
Right.
It's what they've been taught, because all human beings operate off what they've been taught. So we have to go there and say, what kind of ideas was imparted in Generation X and Generation Y, these last 3 to 4 decades? What kind of ideas were they exposed to that they weren't exposed to prior to? Because millions of us, from here to Crips and Bloods and all, we just didn't wake up and say we want to be demonstrative. Somebody had to teach us that. Somebody was a role model for that. Yeah, we took part in somebody else's psychology that wasn't like Big Mamas and them. Because they weren't like that. There's only one group we saw like that was so demonstrative, that was gang up and come to our neighborhood and do all type of violent stuff. It's the very people in the very schools that they were educated. We're just in those schools now. Their curriculum is now our curriculum.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, man. And, you know, it makes perfect sense. The logic is certainly there. And we just need to find ways, I think, to start the process, because, you know, we got to start somewhere, and we really got to work at it. You know, I mean, we got ourselves into this. There's no reason why we can't get ourselves out of it. You know?
That's right, and sleepwalking while black is the first step that can help us get out of it.
I'm agreeing with you. mention that. So let me ask, since you just released your book, have you planned any book releases, any events, so that people can come out and meet you, get to know you?
Yes, actually, I'm having a book signing at 90s Cafe, and that's located on Woodward. That's going to take place on June the 21st on a Saturday at 2 p.m. So I'll be speaking, and afterwards we'll have a book signing. And for people who want to come out, if they want to meet me, want to buy the book, or if they're interested in taking the classes, if they want to, take the Black Psychology class, so they can begin to that first step that we're talking about, regaining their consciousness, so they can come out on the 21st.
So that's 90s on the 21st. What time, Michael?
2 p.m.
Okay,
yep.
Great.
90s June, on the 21st at 2 p.m., and it's located at 12511 Woodward in Highland Park.
Great, 90s Cafe. Okay, so why don't you let everybody know if they want, where they can buy the book and how they can follow you online.
Okay. They can buy the book at the Truth Bookstore, and it will be available on Amazon. And they can also visit my website if they want to contact me at michaelagriggs.com. And I have a lot of information on that website for people who, interested in just learning more. Or they could take a class at Wayne County Community College. I teach about 11 different classes, everything from real estate development to, American history, black psychology. And I studied over in Egypt, so I teach Egyptology in the History 151 course. It's an ancient class about ancient history. So I teach that as well.
Okay, interesting. That is interesting. Yeah. Okay, so that's, give your website again. I'm sorry, michaelagriggs.com. And that's Griggs, that's GRIGGS.com. Yeah. Okay, you got a phone number you want to give anybody? You want to give it?
Sure. It's 313-995-2197.
2197.
313-995-2197. And I'm
great.
Yeah, I hope we got some teachers or principals listening, because I'm eager to work with them to make the changes that we need.
That's right. Y'all hear that? Teachers, principals, educators, anybody out there, we really need to grab a hold to what Michael's talking about and get this ball rolling, because I think that this is a good plan for getting us up out of this mess that we have found ourselves in.
Yes.
Well, Michael, I'm afraid that's our time, buddy. I love talking to you. We're going to have to we're going to have to talk again. But I want to thank you for being my guest today, and especially for stepping up, at such short notice. I understand that, Andrea had to pull a rabbit out of her hat.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you, being available on such short notice the way you have.
Yes, and I appreciate you guys for inviting me. Anytime.
Okay. Well, you know what? On that note, you have a good night, and we will talk soon.
Okay, you take care.
All right,
bye-bye.
You too.